Well, just taking a break, and I recall a question that came in about the cost of owning a horse. And I thought maybe this would be a good opportunity to quickly get this out of the way. There are a lot of things to consider when owning a horse, not just the financial cost, but of course the time cost, like having any animal, I suppose, other than maybe a gerbil or a bird. You might spend less time. But horses can take up a little bit more of your time than the average animal, I guess. Mainly because you're probably going to ride. You know, maybe you might go out and about. Maybe you might do some activities and stuff like that. But barring the extracurricular stuff, let's talk about the basics first. And as you know, I mean, there's the cost of buying a horse. Which can be anything from free to tens of thousands of dollars. So that aside, we're going to leave out the idea of purchase price and talk about what it costs to feed the horse, maintain its health, have a good environment. So essentially from purchase on to just before extracurricular activities. So with that out of the way, an outline of what we're going to be talking about. I've written some notes, so I'm going to use my notes as reference to the things I've thought about so I can hopefully get this out of the way in the most efficient and expeditious way possible. So first things first, you got to have a place for your horse to live. If you don't have your own place, which is obviously the most economical way to have a horse, unless you have nothing, and then you got to build a barn and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have any of that, then you have to board your horse somewhere. Now, location dependent is what the cost is going to be. If you are closer to the city, it's going to be higher. If you're out in the country, it's going to be lower. The more amenities that the place has, riding ring, covered area, wash stations, hot, cold water, tack rooms, it could be pricier. If it's just the most basic place where it's got a field and your horse goes out in it and lives, it's going to be much cheaper. The range of costs can be anywhere. I mean, literally anywhere here in North America. I guess we'll just sort of pin this in. Especially Canada, I'll be talking mostly in Canadian dollars. But it could be anywhere from, say, $1,500 down to $100, depending on what you need. So I'm going to talk about two different types of board. The first is self-board. Self-board is where you bring the hay, you feed your own horse, you clean up after your horse, and that can be very, very cheap. Some people just have a large backyard, you can go put your horse there and you got to maintain it. Maybe $100, $200 a month. You're essentially just paying rent for the space. And hopefully somebody will watch over your horse to see if they're still alive. The second option, so self-board really is self-maintaining your horse, food-wise, care-wise, cleaning up-wise, that kind of stuff. And then the other option is full boards. There is semi-board, but that's hard. That requires a good agreement between you and the person. They might do feeding or something like that, and it might be a little bit more. But usually there's just self and full board. Full board is where the hay is supplied. People, the people there that feed the horse, they'll clean up after the horse. They'll watch your horse and let you know if there's anything wrong, hopefully. So full board also has its range of how much care is actually provided and oversight. Some people are very, very caring, and some places are just paycheck. So thinking about that, full board can range generally anywhere between $400 and again $1,500 or so, depending on the hay and again amenities and stuff like that. So you have to take that into consideration. I would say an average cost for full board is anywhere between $500 and $700 Canadian again. The average cost of self-board is anywhere between $150 and $300 for a better place. So that's kind of board out of the way. And if you're on self-board, you have to consider the next thing, which is food. Full board, it's all included. It's usually all included. You don't have to think about buying hay. You don't have to think about bringing hay. You don't have to think about stacking hay. Nothing. But on self-board, or if you have your own place, you have to consider where you're going to buy your hay, how reliable is it going to be, How much can you store? Do you have to go get it yourself? Can you have it delivered? And so on and so forth. The average cost for, say, a ton of hay, which I think is 1,000 pounds, can't remember now, is around 500 to 550, maybe 600, depending on the time of year. You'll pay a little bit more in the early spring kind of thing when hay is depleted. There's not very much left out there, compared to when it's getting cut and baled. So usually late summer, early fall is when, you know, first cut and second cut start coming out. Third cut, definitely late fall. And first cut is usually the cheapest. Second cut is usually the most expensive, and third cut, if you can get it, is probably around the same as second cut. Now, that's going to depend on the dietary needs of your horse, you know, what kind of hay you get. So there's, you know, orchard, grass, timothy, alfalfa are very common hays to get. Well, alfalfa is a legume, but, you know, it's a forage. So you can also get, a lot of times you get local hay, and they'll go for anywhere between $5 and $10 per bale, unless it's late winter or early spring kind of thing, and then it'll be up towards $15 a bale. And those bales are usually somewhere around 50-60 pounds. If you buy the kind of hay, timothy and stuff like that, is baled into 3-string bales, those will be per ton. You generally don't buy those per bale. I've not seen them very often. So you buy a ton of it and, you know, pay a very particular tonnage price. Usually it's a cheaper route. The local hay does go for quite cheap, but you also have to consider the dietary needs of your horse and how far does it go. It's generally accepted that timothy is a very good hay. Timothy orchard mix is a very good hay. Timothy alfalfa mix is a good hay. You don't really want to do all alfalfa. Alfalfa is sometimes more expensive, but there are places that sell at the exact same cost as timothy, so, or even less actually. Again, depending on the kind of year. Some places want to get rid of their hay, so shop around. But that said, the general cost, you're looking at anywhere between $450 and $550, $600 per ton. And then you need to figure out, well, how much hay does your horse eat? And the idea is you want to feed them 2.5% of their body weight. I'd say anywhere between 25 and 30 to 40 pounds of hay you could possibly go through per day. Wintertime is a little bit more because they need to keep warmer. But summertime you'll be exercising more, so it sort of works out to be about the same. So that's hay out of the way, and you'll need to do a calculation. If you have a little tiny horse, so they're not going to eat very much, so that's how that works. So board and hay out of the way. The next thing we need to think about is any types of supplements or any grains that you want to give. And if your horse is in need of some kind of extra in their diet, whether it's some minerals or vitamins, stuff like that, that's going to be market dependent, and you'll have to go look around for that. You may or may not need it. So sometimes you'll need to consult with your vet if there's a problem with your horse, and they might say, well, your horse is a little bit low in blah blah blah. Then you go pick that up, and that'll be a cost. But generally, mostly just hay is fine. The next thing to think about are vet bills. Now, if your horse doesn't cause itself any real damage and doesn't get hurt in fights with little horses or whatever, then your vet bills are going to be very minimal. You'll be thinking about doing teeth and shots, maybe worming, and possible sheath cleaning. And you don't need a vet for sheath cleaning, for geldings. Plenty of people do it, usually between $30 and $40 per time. Once every year, 2 years kind of thing that can be done, depending. And but vet checks are usually once a year, and you'll probably pay anywhere between $200 and $500 or so for the minimum. For teeth, shots, check. And then if there are any accidents, stuff like that, you'll have to add on to that. Most vets cost cost about 75 bucks just to have them come out. And if they've got to do any bandaging or stitching or anything like that, then obviously the price goes up. X-rays, stuff like that. But in general, if your horses, I mean, all the horses here, I think only Macaroni has cost me extra in vet costs when he got injured on his pastern, and then when he had a hay problem. So other than that, everybody here has been pretty good. It's very, very important that you become knowledgeable in being able to take care of your own horse for small wounds, be able to put small bandages on, and understand when swelling happens, understand how to deal with abscesses if they happen in the feet. That can be very helpful and keep your vet costs down. So far, really, in general, you're going to be dealing with board if you don't have your own place, food if you do have your own place or you're on self-board, and then vet costs. After that, you got to take care of the horse's feet, so you may need a farrier to do shoes if you're doing shoeing for your horse, which is generally accepted in the farrier world to be every 5 to 6 weeks. If you do all four, it's going to be at least 200 bucks. If you just do the fronts, it might be 100 to 120, 150 bucks. If you just trim, personally, I do just trims on barefoot feet, and I do them on my horses every 3 to 4 weeks, and for my clients as well, which is about 50 bucks each time. Some people are lower, they might be going to 30 or 40, and some people might be 50, 60 for just straight trims. So I would factor that in. You can't have a horse without their feet, so this is a must. And of course, as I always advocate, you can learn yourself how to trim and take care of your horse's feet if you want to, which of course saves that cost. So after that, question came in about insurance. And insurance is a tough one. If you have an expensive enough horse, a horse that makes you money or something like that, or you're quite worried it's going to get hurt, then insurance might make sense. I don't know very many people that get horse insurance unless they're eventing or they're doing something their horse is worth a lot of money, but most people don't. I have no idea the cost of insurance because I do not insure my horses. I insure the whole business, but I don't insure the horses here, so I don't know. You'd have to look that up. After that, there's going to be just all the other little things that you may not think about until you get the horse and you think, I wonder how I'm going to teach it blah blah blah, or I wonder what I'm going to ride in, or I don't like what I'm riding in, I want to ride in something else, or the horse's body changes and what you're riding in doesn't work as well anymore. Tack and gear, very, very important, and training. If you can do it yourself, great. If not, you'll have to send your horse to somebody or have somebody come out to you, and that is a cost generally anywhere between $40 and $100 an hour to have a personal trainer come out. You can go to clinics, take your horse. Usually they are minimum of $150 a day, $100 to $150 a day, up to $250 or $400 for a whole weekend kind of thing, and you'll go out and you'll learn a bunch of stuff and go home and practice it, hopefully. So gear and training are kind of those things that if you're going to be with your horse and doing things with your horse, you have to consider, and then it's going to be dependent on your taste or particular wants or needs in that area, and it's hard to really say how much that would cost. You can get saddles anywhere between free, maybe a few $100 up to thousands. Then you have to think about head stalls, you have to think about reins, lead ropes, halters, fly masks, things like that. But once you have those things, it's not a monthly cost anymore. It's just that one-time deal. You pay it, you're done. So the monthly costs, to come back to it, that you're most probably wondering, is care for the horse every day, the environment they live in, whether it's your place or boarding. Food, like hay, if you have your own place, or self-board, you're going to have to supply hay. So there's those costs there. Then there's the vet and trimming. Those are guaranteed. You're going to have to do every year. And I would say that the average horse probably costs anywhere between, if you're boarding, you're probably going to be in the around the $500 range per month. If you're doing full board and it's a really nice expensive kind of place, then it's going to be much higher. But you don't have to think about food, you just have to think about making sure to keep them trimmed and have the vet come out once a year, which is, you know, as I said, a few $100. So if you work that out, you know, it's not a lot per month. It's sort of a lump sum that happens once a year. From there, it's just what you want to do after that. If you want to go into eventing, if you want to haul them places, if you want to get a truck and trailer, that's an initial cost. Or if you're hauling, then you can expect to pay anywhere between $20 for very short trips, maybe more, $40 or so, to $100, $150, depending if you're going to go a little bit further. And you got to get home too. There's that cost that may be involved as well. And then, of course, if your horse injures itself, then that's going to be an extra cost. No different than if your truck or car breaks down or your fridge stops working, you got to buy another fridge. These things can happen, doesn't mean that they will. Like I said, the horse is here. No real injuries outside of Macaroni. You know, everything else has been kind of manageable. Small abrasions, cuts, kicks from other horses. Sometimes they'll be a little bit bruised or something. Most of the time they just heal up and everything's fine. So knowledge is power though, and you can save money the more you know, so you don't have the vet come out for something that is small. And they come out and they're like, yeah, everything seems to be fine, just here, you know, take care of it, ice it or hose it every day or something along those lines. So the more you know, the better. You can save yourself money in vet costs. And if you do your research and get to know other people, you can probably save money in hay if you're supplying your own hay. And then the less you need for your horse, a big arena, a covered arena, hot and cold water in your wash stall, all those things can save you money if you just need the basics. Most horses can live out in a field with decent amount of grass and some hay and shelter and clean water. You can do pretty good. Blanketing, if you blanket your horse, you have to buy a blanket. So one-time costs are out there, but for the most part, that would probably be about it. Hopefully that's helped, and if you guys have any questions, let me know anytime, and I will do a second video if I need to. If not, I'll just answer the questions, but that would be about it. Thanks for watching. See you guys again tomorrow.